Hello and welcome to Believe in Purdue Friday edition. I'm Sam Sprunger, as always, joined by Grant Flora. Grant, welcome to Friday.
Yeah, it's been a week. I feel like it's actually going by like kind of fast, but that might just be me. But we're
Well,
getting there.
if you're busy, it always goes quickly then,
Yeah.
because there's never enough time in the day to do everything that you have when you're really busy. But uh, big this is a situation I didn't know that we would be in when we started Believe in Purdue. I didn't envision Purdue being in a 3-game losing streak, unless you're talking football, honestly. And uh, but here we are, 3-game losing streak, and Sunday it's maybe easier in the aspect of the team's performance that Purdue's playing, but they go to IU to Assembly Hall, which a rivalry game and Assembly Hall never are an easy place to go.
Yeah, on paper it looks like it could be an easier game, but
Yeah.
look at the way this IU team has played. They haven't been a consistent team at all, but their talent is really there. They have several guys that honestly should be looking at NBA type aspirations, at least at some point. Probably headlined by Mackenzie and Baco. But they have the talent. They've also stepped up when they really have something to play for. Like when this team plays as a unit with one purpose and one goal, like they're tough to stop. Look at what they did at the Breslin Center. I
Right.
mean, I think part of that had to do with the fact that Tom Izzo was trying to break Bob Knight's record that night and had to play Indiana. Indiana came in and they didn't let that happen. You
Right.
saw what they did in Mackey Arena against Purdue. When they have a purpose, when there's a little bit more meaning to the game, I think they step up and show up a little bit more. And so that has to worry you if you're Purdue.
Well, and looking at their last 5, you mentioned the win at the Breslin Center. They won 71-67 to prevent Tom Izzo from passing Bob Knight at that point. Their other 4 games in their last 5, they've lost. The only one that they lost by more than 5 points is the game at Wisconsin. They lost to Purdue by 5. They lost to home at Michigan against Michigan by 3, and then 4 points against UCLA on Valentine's Day. So they haven't been playing. They've been playing pretty decent, even with losing aspects going from the last time they played at Mackey Arena.
Yeah, and so again, I think there are lots of potential matchup issues they possess early. Yeah, they possess for Purdue. Obviously playing in Assembly Hall with that revenge aspect of trying to get back at Purdue because of what happened in Mackey, where Indiana led the majority of that second half and really looked like they were gonna have a nice chance to pull off that upset, and then Purdue made some plays late to get escape with a win. Honestly,
Yeah.
so again, there's a lot of things that are gonna make this a really difficult game for Purdue beyond just the simple basketball of it.
Well, from that last game, what do you envision Purdue making adjustment wise that maybe helps them a little bit more in that? I mean, do you have any thoughts of what Purdue adjustments they make to try to counteract those matchups that are not good for them?
Yeah, it's tough because I think a lot of it has to do with personnel, and sometimes, especially defensively, there isn't a whole lot you can do
Yeah.
when you have guys that are going to struggle defensively against some of IU's players. I think offensively, you have to spread the floor a little bit more. Braden Smith has to search more for his offense, but also like Fletcher Lawyer has just got to get involved. We talked about this in the Michigan State reaction, but he just has to simply be more aggressive. And again, Smith and TKR have to make sure they find him and he pulls the trigger on those shots. But also, we talked about the bench. I mean, we talked about all these things Purdue needs to do offensively. Defensively, especially with Fletcher Lawyer having to guard either Mackenzie Mbako or even like a Trey Galloway, Anthony Leal, all those guys really can take him and try and exploit that matchup. I wouldn't be surprised, or if it were me, I would probably try and have some help for Fletcher Lawyer. If he's guarding anybody on the perimeter, guys have to be ready to show help immediately because he's likely to get beaten off the dribble. They're likely to try and exploit that. So help has to be there, and then they have to be able to rotate to recover when of course, if Fletcher gets beaten, now there's going to be an open man if they don't recover and rotate.
Well, I'm seeing the rebounding is a big caveat of whether or not Purdue's successful against IU on Sunday, because if you remember the last time they were out rebounded by IU, and it required them to, have those or those couple plays in the last waning minutes to be able to expand out and actually get the win in Mackey. I think it's and Purdue's we've been doing a great job recently on at least staying even with our teams, or with our opponents. And I mean, I think Michigan State out rebounded them by 2 the other night. So I mean, that's not a horrible discrepancy, but at the same time, you've got to limit the offensive rebounds, which is what killed Purdue against IU and Mackey Arena.
Yeah, and in that game, IU had 20 turnovers as opposed to Purdue's 10. That's kind of where they helped make up that difference. I don't expect IU to turn the ball over that many times because they're playing better basketball now and they're at home. You're always going to take care of the basketball better when you're at home, at least from a general standpoint. So if they don't win, or if they don't make that much ground up in turnovers, they're going to have to supplement it with better rebounding, like you said. So certainly, especially with the size Indiana brings, that's going to be tough. Malik Renew in that last matchup only played, I believe, 8 minutes.
Yes.
So they primarily played with just one center and then Mbako at the 4. Miles Rice started that game. Trey Galloway ended up coming in and playing 25 minutes. And I think since then, Galloway has been the consistent starter for IU, from what I've seen. So obviously, they've decided not to play 2 centers at once for most of that game. And part of it could have been Renew still coming back from injury.
Well, if he was in foul trouble as well.
Yes, that's true. He actually did foul out of that game, so that would explain that. But if they do play together a lot more, again, that's just going to pose a lot of problems because you're going to ask. I mean, if Purdue plays first in Cuff and Wren, they can kind of handle it. But again, with the foul trouble they've been getting in, as soon as you take one of those 2 guys out, you're going to have some major mismatches down in the post, and that affects rebounding, that affects defense, it affects all sorts of things.
Let's be honest on or at least for me on this, is if Mike Woodson wants to try to end his IU career as a coach with 500 record against Purdue, it would almost be in his a good game plan would be put your Twin Towers in there and try to get the Purdue's big men in foul trouble, because it's been a trend lately, because Umar Ballo is the most dominant person when he's in and not in foul trouble. He was throwing himself around, getting rebounds offensively, getting points in the game at Mackey, but he was in some foul trouble too. And if you remember, he fouled out at the end of the game too. So now Purdue can, if they can get them in foul trouble, that is a big advantage to them because it limits how often they can play. But I tell you, with the home crowd and with the ability to get first and TKR, and if Raleigh Burgess plays him in some foul trouble, it might bode well for IU to play their big guys.
Yeah, I think offensively, I would just love, like if I'm Indiana, I would love to just throw it into Ballo and Renew and let them go one-on-one with those Purdue post guys. I don't think Purdue necessarily will let that happen. I think they'll probably bring some doubles and throw some different things at them. And then it comes down to whether those big guys can pass. And I feel like at Mackey, they did a decent job of passing. They turned the ball over 20 times, but they also found some guys and were able to score through the double team. So either way, especially if you have both of them in there, they're going to have a lot of ways they can score if they can execute their offense the way they want to.
Yeah, well, the Boilers, we still have to go back in this, or go back to the bench in this game with the style that IU plays. They're big man centric. They don't necessarily defend greatly around the edge. We need some shooters. So we need. I would love to see Cam Heide be one of the ones that is able to get some shots off, but he's got the explosive first move a little bit more than maybe Colvin. Colvin has got some ups, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't seem to me as one that can take somebody off the dribble like Heide can.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they're both capable, but I think Heidi has
Sure.
shown more of that. And for sure can definitely get out and break guys down. That's what I've been looking for really for the majority of the season. It's just for one of those guys to be more than just a shooter and a defender. And so I definitely think Heidi could be big in this game. Overall, shooting is going to be critical. Purdue went 2 of 13 in the last matchup in Mackey Arena. That rarely
Yeah.
ever happens. If they can find a way to even just make between 5 and 10, that's going to help them a lot more. Because honestly, to play an Indiana team that is bigger than you, more talented in the post, aside from maybe Trey Kaufman-Renn, but just with Ballo and Renew,
The
um,
combination is better. Yeah.
right, and athletic guards as well that are going to pressure them and just make life difficult for them on both sides of the court. To shoot 2 of 13 and still find a way to win the game is actually pretty impressive.
Sure.
So if Purdue finds a way to make between 5 and 10, preferably closer to 10 threes, they actually might be in really, really good shape. So a lot of it could come down to shooting.
Unfortunately, in this 3-game losing streak, that could be a telltale sign for like if they would have made more from just some more of their threes, that gives them a better shot because they haven't been on fire from three. I mean, Michigan might have been their best game maybe from threes. I don't have the stats in front of me, but it seems to me that they made a few more threes than they have either of the other two games. But that's been a going trend this year. Is if it's not Lawyer, there's not many that, or even Smith on occasion. He struggles at times from threes too, but he's, to me, showing that he's not taking as many threes. He's going to try to penetrate and get that close shot, which good on him. I mean, he's being effective doing it. He's been able to draw fouls like that, but it seems to me that if it's not Lawyer or Smith to an occasion, if they're not hitting threes, there's not really anybody that is on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I think that's been the reason for the slump has been
Yep.
Fletcher Lawyer's struggles, and Smith has gotten threes up. He just hasn't knocked them down, and it's hard to blame him because so many of his threes are off the dribble and off of ball screens and whatnot. They're not staying still threes like what
Right.
you'll see Fletcher Lawyer get and those other guys get. I feel like guys like Jakari Harris, even C.J. Cox, have done a nice job knocking them down. Like they haven't when they've been open. I feel like there's a 50-50 shot they'll make it. But Lawyer and Smith kind of control that volume, and when
Right.
they haven't been making them, you end up with nights where Purdue scores at most 4 or 5 threes. So yeah, I would totally agree that it has to start with Lawyer and Smith.
Yeah. The one thing I've thought is, are Harris and Cox at that point where Lawyer and Smith were a couple years ago as freshmen, where they were playing at a very good clip, not necessarily contributing greatly, but playing a really consistent clip. And now they've hit that freshman wall to where, okay, I'm not used to playing this many games at this level of competition. And you hit a little bit of that wall. If you remember a couple years ago, Lawyer and Smith did that to where, like, at a certain point, their production went down a little bit. And it was because they hit that so-called freshman wall. I mean, would you agree with that, or do you just think there's some inconsistencies right now that doesn't really have much to do with?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think luckily they aren't in as big of roles as Smith and Lawyer were last year, which I think
Correct.
gives them the ability to kind of survive it because they don't have to play as heavy of minutes. They don't have to take as many shots. They're not being focused on as much by the defense. So I don't necessarily think it's actually going to be as bad as what we noticed with Smith and Lawyer 2 years ago. But yeah, I think for any freshman, that's a concern. And especially once you get into February, you're definitely going to see that. And I think that definitely could be part of it with Cox and Jakari, especially on the defensive end. Like we've seen CJ Cox, especially, but even Jakari Harris force some steals, really heat up the ball handler. I feel like we haven't quite seen that defensive edge from either of them in this losing streak and even some of the games before that. So, I definitely think some fatigue and mentally and physically could kind of be coming in and setting in that freshman wall like you talked about. So, yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, we'll go ahead and take a quick break. We'll come back and finish up kind of our thoughts on Sunday night, or Sunday afternoon, and then also maybe a couple other topics. But we're going to take a break for the audio podcast. You're listening to Believe in Purdue on the Believe and Lounge Sports Network. All right, we are back. Grant, Sunday at Assembly Hall at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Purdue jumps that right now. ESPN has them at a 65.4% chance of winning in the matchup predictor. Do you feel as comfortable at 65%?
I really don't, because I don't feel like Purdue is playing the basketball that they're used to. And I feel like there's a lot here for Indiana to really be motivated and come out and play better basketball than what we typically see from them. So it's going to be a tough one, but at the same time, Purdue has to respond at some point, and they always are down for a game against Indiana, as in like they're going to bring it. So I'm not going to question or doubt the effort and intensity that Purdue brings to the game. It's just, is it going to be enough to match what Indiana has and be able to outplay them in their own house?
Yeah, it's I think 65% to me. I wouldn't say I'm 65% sure Purdue's going to win this. Am I sure that they are the better team? Yes. Am I sure that IU, normally and IU's going to put forward a fight? Absolutely. Hey, this is a rivalry game where, yes, it's tough for Purdue, but it's tough for IU too. They've got the same side of, or same feeling of, anything can happen. Now, does that give them hope? Yes. But at the same time, they know that Purdue is capable of blowing up and just running roughshod through Assembly Hall. This is a team that hit 19 threes against Nebraska. So therefore, this team can put up 106. And it's not, they put up 84 at home against Wisconsin and got beat because of their defense and some hot shooting from Wisconsin. So even in a losing effort, they can put up a lot of points if they're hitting right. And it only takes one game of this bench of, hey, Heidi hits 3 threes, Colvin hits 3 threes, Jakari Harris hits a couple, Cox hits 3, Braden Smith hits 3, and Lawyer hits 5. I mean, it can add up really, really quick if they all hit. So IU's got a lot to look at when it comes to, okay, what do we attack? What do we do? And oh, hey, by the way, TKR still probably going to get 20 to 25. That's just what he's been doing in the recent Big Ten season. And so this is going to be a very, I don't know. It's not because of, but we've got to take into consideration, what do the refs let them play? Do they let them, bang around in the low post and actually, have a lot of contact? Because if that's the case, we're going to see some fouls that aren't called. Are they going to be touchy? Are all of the big men going to be in trouble because that's the way they're going to go? We don't know. That's something that we've got to wait until Sunday afternoon to see. How's this game going to go? Are our big guys going to be able to bang around with the big guys down low? Or is it going to be who can shoot the best?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's how these games are officiated always is really, really a big factor. And we've seen that happen in Purdue's last 3 games. And just the way I feel like the officials have been a little tighter on the calls for both teams. Just they've kind of been a little more, they haven't wanted to let them play as much. But this could definitely be a game in a rivalry setting where they're gonna let them play a little bit more. And how will Trakoff and Wren and Caleb First handle that when they're going up against some bigger, more physically imposing big guys? Definitely will be a storyline to watch. Like you said, the shooting, all of those things. Purdue, it always feels like when they go to Assembly Hall, like Indiana's going to be rocking and rolling. They're playing Purdue. It's at Indiana. Like, that's going to be tough for Purdue to even handle. And sometimes there are games where they go to IU and I'm thinking I don't really see them having a great shot to win this game, just because IU's going to come out and really be on fire. Maybe it's a year that Purdue isn't that much better than IU. kind of like what we saw a couple of years ago with the Zach Edey team when they
Yep.
went into Assembly Hall against Trace Jackson Davis. Like Purdue is better, but IU is still good, and Indiana and then Assembly Hall they were just rocking and rolling. Indiana gets the win. But then there are also years where we're in that situation and Purdue blows them out and they just play really good basketball. So as a Purdue fan, I'm hoping for that because that would be just such a great way to flush out the 3-game losing streak is to go to your rival to bring it and just have one of those stellar performances that nobody's really expecting. And next thing you know, you win a 10 to 20 point game. And you just start to put that stretch in your rear view mirror and you go in. They'll have another home game coming up against, is it UCLA after this?
UCLA on Friday.
Not going to be an easy game, but again, another chance to kind of get back in rhythm and establish themselves. Maybe not as a Big Ten champion contender down the road, just that'll depend on what the other teams do. Could happen. I mean, everybody's playing tough games.
Yep.
But they'll at least help get themselves back on track into the Big Ten tournament with a double bye and a chance to still have a decent seed come the NCAA tournament. I think that has to be the primary focus right now.
Well, and I guess what Matt Painter needs to be doing is let's get through the slump. You know, wherever our seed falls for the Big Ten tournament, it falls. We're not going to worry about that part. We want the best possible. Yes, absolutely. And like you said, you don't know how the upper teams, Wisconsin, Michigan, Michigan State, those 3 teams play each other a lot. And then Wisconsin doesn't have, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked to see Wisconsin as the 1 seed coming out in the beginning of March at Indy. I'm not going to say that I think that's what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be shocked. Right now, Michigan is a game up, I believe, or a game and a half up on Michigan State. Oh, no, only a half a game up on Michigan State. But Wisconsin is at 11-4, Michigan State's at 12-3, Michigan's at 12-2, and Purdue sits at 11-5. They're not out of it by any means, but you know what? Let's worry about getting the best seed possible, and then you know what? We've prepped all year with all these tough matchups to get prepared and ready to grind it out in late March, because that's, you know, you want the Big Ten title, but if it's logistically and realistically probably not going to happen, let's keep doing what we do. And if something happens to where we still get that title, great. If not, we're getting more prepared for March.
Yeah, and, you know, looking ahead to March, and specifically the NCAA tournament, I think it's going to be just such an interesting year because Purdue, they're a step back from last year, but they're still good. They're still going to get a top 4 seed at least, I would think, and most likely maybe like a 3. So that's a good place to be as far as making a deep run because you'll get to the Sweet 16 if you're assuming they can get through the first 2 games. Obviously, that is by no means a given. But if they can get to the Sweet 16, they maybe play a 2 seed, which is a team they should be able to compete with. That gets them to the Elite 8 if they were to win. Like they can, it's set up to have the ability to make a deep run, and the pressure is just not going to be there. I mean, this is going to be wild. This is the first time in, it feels like 20, 30 years at least, probably more than that, where the pressure to get to the Final Four really just isn't there because they did it last year and their team's good, but it's not to the point where they're expected to make the Final Four. So how does that just, how does the loss of that burden play a factor in how they perform in March? It's going to be really interesting. As long as they can do the right things now to help set themselves up better, it'll be really fun to watch to see how that plays out.
Well, and I've gone on the record and before on other shows and whatnot. I hold a Big Ten championship more important as a Final Four run and a national championship. That's not saying I don't want those things, but I also know that matchups are what matters in March in the tournament. And if you just happen not to match up well, you're going to get bit. One of the big criticisms about Matt Painter is he's the only coach to have lost to, what is it, a 12, a 13, a 14, a 15, and a 16 seed. He's the only coach. And Yeah, that looks bad, but you know what? He's also won, I believe, 5 Big Ten championships. You know, that is that means a fourth of his career at Purdue. They've been Big Ten champions, and or more. I may be wrong on that. I know he's got at least 5. I know that much. I'm pretty positive. At least I can think of 4, maybe 5. But still, the point being is I hold a Big Ten championship as more important of a successful season as a run in March. But when you've got to be realistic about it too, you know, if that is out of the realm of possibility or out of likelihood, you prep for the tournament. And you're right, there isn't as much pressure this year to perform because last year they had to make the Final Four or it was going to be a disappointing season. They had to. You know, you don't have the 2-time National Player of the Year and not make the Final Four at least one of those years. And the year before, they'd lost historically to a 16 seed, so it became even more pressure packed. There's no expectation. You don't have Zach Edey anymore, so there's no absolute expectation of making the Final Four. And I think that's a great plus going into March. It's just you got to get through and fix tinker with some things while still trying to play at a very high production. And right now they're struggling with it.
Yeah. You know what I'll say about the that stat about Painter with the 12, 13, 14, you know.
Yeah.
For one thing, there's only 2 coaches that are even that could possibly have that because there's only 2 coaches that have lost to a 16
Right.
seed.
Correct.
For another thing, it also means they were a 1 seed, 2 seed, 3 seed, 4 seed, and 5 seed. Now I know they lost to the 15 seed in the Sweet 16.
I was going to say as a 3 seed.
As a 3 seed, but they have been a 2 seed before, so I feel fine in saying that. But the reason I bring that up is it speaks to Painter's success. He knows what to do, and yeah, he's lost to those types of teams. He's also had a stretch where he made 4 Sweet 16s in a row, 3. I mean, he has made the second weekend several times, and it was really more of a problem. They couldn't get past the Sweet 16. They only made the Elite Eight a couple times, and they couldn't get past it then either. So, really, their issues more came down the road when they played some of those tougher teams in the second weekend, and everybody gets upset if you are 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're a high seed enough times, you're gonna lose one of them at some point. It's just gonna happen. It's the way the tournament works. Mike Krzyzewski at Duke lost several first round games, lost several games that he was a higher seed in. He was the best coach this sport has ever seen, in my opinion. So, it's with the exception of maybe John Wooden, I'll say that, but
I never got to see him coach, so I don't know.
Yeah, my point is, yeah, you can lose games in the first round. You can have struggles in March. It doesn't mean you're not a good coach because every good coach has faced struggles in March and lost early games.
Well, and that's why I mentioned that the way I did is I hold the regular season a little bit more important in my mind as to a successful season because of who you get matched up with. Sometimes, Vermont as a 15 seed sometimes is looked at as, oh, this could be a big pick. Or, a Mercer as a 12 seed. Ooh, watch out for Mercer. That's the point is whoever gets, 2 years ago when Purdue got, or not 2 years ago, 3 years ago with Ivy, they had Yale in the first round. A lot of people were picking Yale to win as a 14 seed. So it just depends who you get matched up with in March. Whereas who you're playing in the Big Ten come the regular season. And to me, when you succeed and you're up in the high parts of the league, that's a more of a success of whether or not you made it to the second weekend or the third weekend or cut down the nets. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I as hard as it's been as a Purdue fan to watch a lot of those losses and had to wait until the Final Four, I can't blame Painter for a lot of that because for one thing, he's coaching, but he's not playing the games. It's really difficult to play in those situations, and also because he put himself in those positions, and he's shown that he can do it because last year he did it. So, yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out with starting with the game at Indiana on Sunday, and then how they move forward and seeding, how that falls, and all of that good stuff.
Well, I'm excited to watch the game. Hopefully it ends. I would love to see a 15 to 17 3-pointers made performance. Not gonna expect it, but I would love to see it because that means okay, they're getting back into the groove. Maybe we'll see a different Purdue squad going forward from there. But that brings us to the end of Believe in Purdue Friday edition. Grant, enjoy the basketball this weekend. Everybody, thank you for joining us. We'll see you on Monday.